Present.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. So I just wanted to kind of introduce you to us a little bit. Just like you were mentioning, very similar to Friends of the Saugatucket, Now River, who's not too far from here, a lot of the similar organizations. We are the official watershed group for this coastal ponds. So everywhere from Point Judith, Potter, and Green Hill, which are entirely or in part in South Kingstown, all the way down to Ninigret, Clonaketog, and Winnipeg, all the way down into Westerly. And our mission, just like many of the other groups, is to either enhance the health or protect the salt ponds. And we are designated by the state to speak on behalf of the resource itself. My other hat is actually chair of the Rhode Island Rivers Council. So that's the body that designates all the watershed groups. So I mentioned where we have our jurisdiction. I'm assuming probably everybody here has been to a coastal pond, but I always throw this in. They were coastal lagoons that were created after the retreat of the glaciers. And some of the reasons why they're important is that they provide crucial habitat and ecosystem services. So a lot of smaller or breeding animals, anything from horseshoe crabs to flounder, seahorse, things like that, all rely on the salt ponds for breeding. They're a great nursery habitat. And of course, for the local community, they do serve as an area of recreation. But every beautiful place has its challenges, and the salt ponds are no exception. They are vulnerable. For example, Green Hill is a great example of being vulnerable to pollution, but they're also vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise. We've seen loss of biodiversity and habitat and storm impacts, and I'll actually talk about habitat in a little bit. I mentioned the 3 ponds that are in South Kingstown, either entirely or in part, so the western side of Point Judith, of course, as well as the Saugatucket, which leads into Point Judith Pond, are in South Kingstown. And we do have some impaired waters, which I'll talk a little bit about in that pond. Potter Pond, of course, where the Tuna Oyster Bar is, and one of my favorite things is the giant kettle hole in Potter Pond. It's about a 40 or 30-foot deep hole. I've always wanted to see what's down the hole, but it's a beautiful area. And then Green Hill Pond, which is shared with Charlestown. Most of it lies in South Kingstown, though. Beautiful area, but it does have an impaired waterway, and it's actually the only salt pond that's not open to shellfishing. So what do we do to protect the salt ponds? A little bit of everything. Our backbone is monitoring. We've been doing that since 1985. It's our 40th year this year. We do a lot of education outreach to the local community, and we do advocacy both on the town and state levels. And then we are partnered with a lot of other nonprofits, like you mentioned earlier, Saugatucket, Orca, a lot of those groups we work on projects with. We also work with the towns and the state, and I'm hoping to come here tonight to start bolstering a little bit of our work with South Kingstown. So as I mentioned, we started in 1985 with our pond watching program. Currently, we have about 27 sites across all of the 6 ponds, and we have over actually 35 monitors now. And all of our data goes to URI Watershed Watch. So some of the things that we test for and what we keep an eye out for are things like dissolved oxygen. Less oxygen in the water stresses out the animals. We look at nutrients. This is a big part. So runoff from anything from septic systems and fertilizers. We look for the elevated presence of bacteria in the ponds. For the most part, it's usually pretty good with some exceptions. But then we also have our peak years. 2019 was a year of a lot of rain and a lot of exceptional bacterial input into the ponds, and that was something we actually had to contact the Department of Health about. Because it became such a concern. And then we do monitor longer-term trends, things like pH and temperature. Those are indicators of sea level rise, salinity, chlorophyll A, which is an indicator of algal growth, which has been a problem on the ponds for the past few years, as well as water clarity. Everything comes at a cost, which I always just put in there. You can do the math. We have over 27 sites, $700 a site. So this by far is our biggest outlay every year. And we are, I'm going to say, 95% member funded. We get some grants when we work with the towns and things like that, but for the most part, we're all funded by the community. And all of our data is available to the public. I'm actually, fingers crossed, very soon going to be publishing a new interactive online portal with all of our data. I'm working with the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program to accomplish that. So that way it'll be even easier to access our data online. You'll be able to look at sites, look at trends, instead of me going through an Excel spreadsheet and creating a lot of line graphs. This will actually be more interactive, and it'll help us to be able to respond to certain issues and find trends a little bit faster. So just some sites of concern that I wanted to bring up in the town of South Kingstown. For bacteria, Teal Road and Green Hill Pond, which is on the eastern side, for both types of bacteria. And then Point Judith Pond, the Saugatucket River, we test at the very southern point at Caleb's Dock, and that most northern point in Ram Point. Once you kind of get into the body proper, you have a little bit of pollution in Long Cove, but it seems to flush through the rest of Point Judith Pond. But that upper area is an area of concern for us. Same area for nitrogen. Ram Point exceeded acceptable standards throughout the past couple of seasons. We don't have our 2024 data yet. And Green Hill Pond, especially Teal Road, was trending upwards for total nitrogen. And good news on the other side of the pond is that we are actually seeing a decrease in some nitrogen. So hopefully that'll continue. I mentioned a loss of habitat. One thing that I kind of found striking over the past few years is that we've lost a lot of our submerged aquatic vegetation in all of the ponds. So eelgrass and widgeon grass are the two primary types of aquatic vegetation that we have, and as I was mentioning before, they provide a lot of habitat and nursery area. And they can be impacted from anything like temperature to water clarity to nutrient loading. We think that the issues that we're currently seeing are a combination of temperature, because even though the ponds might not be getting warmer overall, like for example, if they've always hit a high of 80, they're still hitting a high of 80, but they're hitting that high of 80 sooner and staying that high longer. So, for example, eelgrass likes cooler temperatures. So widgeon grass is doing a little bit better when it comes to that, but you also have algae and other things that are completely smothering the bottom, and that's where those eelgrasses are coming from. So to give you an idea of acreage, Green Hill Pond in 2009 had close to 140 acres, and now you're down to 3 acres total in Green Hill Pond. You had just under 80 acres in Potter Pond, and now you've got about half that, just under 40 acres. And then at its height in 2012, you had about 100 acres, and now you're just about, I think it was like 30 acres or so in Point Judith Pond. And what we're also seeing, like I mentioned before, is where there was eelgrass, if we are seeing an uptick in widgeon grass, it's just outcompeting it probably because of temperature. I kind of already said this, but we think it's because of increased temperature and nutrient pollution. And just to kind of give you an idea of where those pockets of eelgrass as of 2021 are, they're where you have those dark patches or the hatched patches. So you can see there's not a ton left in Green Hill, which I know is not marked on the map, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's this pond right next to Ninigret, which is great, and then we have some residual in Point Judith. also the kind of fun part of my job. I don't have kids, but I do like I call myself the auntie of a lot of students. I take them into the field to get them to actually connect with nature. I'll be doing that actually starting this Thursday. We do camp programming during the summer, and we actually create a field trip curricula that is based on the salt pond. So it's taking the concepts that kids actually are learning at these grade levels and then trying to find real examples of that in the salt pond so that when they come, for example, runoff or erosion, we can show them those examples in a real place in their backyard. And then for adults, we don't want to leave them out either. We do guided beach walks, guided paddle tours. We have speaker events last year we did a bird walk. We're going to be doing that again this year. And we're actually going to do our first art program on the salt pond, so that'll be a lot of fun. And I always make the pitch if anybody's interested in becoming a member. It's like I said earlier, it's the lifeblood of who we are. And I invite you to come to any one of our events. We're just starting to post our calendar. All of our events are free and open to the public. We don't charge for anything other than our annual fundraiser. It's the only event we charge for. So our website is saltpondscoalition.org, and we'd love to have you guys visit us. That's my just like little 5-minute spiel, but I'd much rather just have a conversation and talk. So. Any other questions? I was hoping today to just kind of start a dialogue with the town. I will admit, in South Kingston, it's been a tougher nut for me to crack. And I would love, yes. So I would love to just start talking about ways in which we can help connect with the community, if there's initiatives or things that are important to the town when it comes to preserving these resources that we can help partner with and help. That's kind of what my bailiwick is getting into the communities and teaching and doing all of that kind of stuff in the ground. I can't necessarily, like for example in Charlestown, our partnership with the upgrade of the septic systems. I can't upgrade a septic system, but I can go out and talk about it. I can write newsletter articles. I can help produce different things that help to get a message across and tell a story. And that's kind of what we're good at. Yes.
Yeah, all right. I guess it's all right. Well, they've already been phased out. We instituted a phase out, I believe it goes back as far as 2005. In fact, I think we were the only town to do it as a town. The state was doing it, DEM was doing it, but it was usually at the change of ownership. So, well, let me just keep going a little bit. So we instituted a phase out many years ago. But what happened was there was first a requirement. Everybody was notified that they had to get an inspection. The inspection was telling us whether they had a cesspool or not. If they weren't able to prove that they had a standard cesspool, a standard septic system, they were a cesspool. And and then so everybody received a notice of violation. Then they received a second notice, and it was, now we're going to record it. Then it was recorded against the property. So what happens is, and eventually, everybody tries to do an addition on their house. Whatever they do, it pops up. And then we're requiring at that point that they replace it, or they're not getting any improvements to the house, or they're not selling it. The state instituted in 2015 a law that said that at the change of hand, when it's sold, it's got to be updated within a year by either a new owner or whatever, because I think they were running into the same problem we have. These people are getting rid of these houses, they don't have any money to, and it's the last minute, they don't, it gets found out that they don't have they have a cesspool, and it's a whole big rigmarole, so we're actually relying on that state law. But what we're also doing is that when somebody comes in for some sort of other housing violation and they're going to municipal court for some reason, we're tacking on the cesspool problem. So we're trying to grab it now through municipal court. And at some point, once we can reduce our non-inspection people, which, their inspections may have come back fine, but they haven't been inspected in 5 years, and there's been differing information. We struggle a little bit, and I don't know if you've picked up on this, but there's been differing information on when you should be inspected. The state actually, I believe, says it's based on what the inspector suggests. And we have, I think, 5 years, I believe, or 3 or 5, and EPA, I think, says 3, I believe. I think they're much more strict or something like that. There's some weird arrangement on it. So, but we're going to identify exactly what we want to require, and I believe it's going to be 5, or it could just for now. And then we have to get it to a point where we reduce the number of non-inspections down so that we can now say, listen, we're taking you to municipal court. You just got to get it inspected. It's $200, get it pumped, get it clean. You should be doing that anyways. And then you'll be fine.
Do you have a sense for how many cesspools are still in existence in this case?
Cesspools, I don't know exactly, but I would say we're in the hundreds, perhaps. I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. I don't know.
How has
hundreds out of thousands and thousands, right? So it's not. It's again, we're finding them. We find them through the planning process. It happens very frequently.
Yeah, I understand. There's nobody going out sniffing them out. So yeah, it just has to come up organically.
Well, no. So again, now that we have municipal court, there is a point where we're going to reach and say, listen, enough's enough. We're going to just take everybody to municipal court. I mean, you're in violation. You've got to notice, it's recorded against the property. The ones that worry me are the ones that we didn't even know. Like, we may not have seen an inspection, or some reason it slipped through the cracks. I'll tell you one that came up that was really weird, and we didn't, it's just not. We have one staff person. They're only part-time, basically, on that particular task. They do other things through the day, but they're on that task. So it came up recently. The main house had a septic system, properly functioning, everything fine. An accessory building in the back, cesspool, right? So when they came in to do a swimming pool, then we gave them, they didn't even have anything recorded against the property. So now we go after them. We recorded it against the property, and now we can, take that further if we want to.
Do you feel like the municipal court has been operating as intended? We're like 2 or 3 months into it, right?
Well, the only thing we've done so far, we do have one cesspool up there, but the other things that we've done are trees, and it's been great.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody cuts down a tree, municipal court. We had
People are
somebody,
showing
we had
up for
somebody
their
plant
dates.
a garden. We had somebody plant a garden in the right of way. And it was right up against the road. I mean, they were out there pulling rhubarb out, and they're right in the road. It was on Green Hill Beach Road. I mean, it was a mess. And they drove a fence in. They put a fence in, and it's right over the Intercontinental communications cable, the AT&T. It is like so illegal, I can't even tell you. And so, we brought her in, and unfortunately, she denied everything, and we had pictures of her doing it, and then she said, "Oh yeah, that was me." And so, it was actually kind of funny. This is all public record, so it was kind of funny, but she took it out. So those are the types of things we're doing, But right now, that's what we've been doing. So that's
Jay, or anyone who was here when Dennis was here, Friends of Green Hill Pond was the organization that he was affiliated with, right?
Yeah. So they were helpful with us. They they were great. So we did a whole public outreach thing. We did a bunch of things. We had a bunch of mailers and things like that. But I haven't really taken that and put it up on the web or anything yet. But I'll get to it eventually. But the Friends were very helpful in promoting everything that we were doing, getting community support, but also they help fund, we have a matching requirement, and they help fund that. Yeah. So it was real nice. Now Dennis is in Richmond, but, and I've got a new contact, actually, and I've talked to him. He's a great guy, so.
Just for anybody who's listening to this meeting at another time, our former member, Dennis Bowman, was also a member of Friends of Green Hill Pond, and I think he was kind of championing a lot of their efforts within the CONCOM. I think that one of the missions of that organization was to delineate all of the cesspools or delineate what types of septic systems were in all the residences around Green Hill Pond. And I know that they hired a grant writer, and we're trying to get some funding to do that research. Do we know where that left off?
No, I mean, he was pinging us to create a list, and that's not the way, and he was doing it through APRA and all this stuff, but that's not the way APRA works. We don't create stuff. He can just as easily search on, we use Carmody, which is the software that we use to track everything. He can easily search that. So I think he was going about a data dump on that to try to figure out what type of system. I mean, his goal was to get to a point where we require that everybody go to an advanced system. That would be fantastic. But that is and what I suggested is we should require that nobody ever, put fertilizer in their yard. They push back against that. I think there's a lot of things we can do, and I'm disappointed that maybe we haven't helped you as much as we should, but maybe we can do that going forward.
For new construction,
or at least work with you more.
Does the town of South Kingstown require denitrification systems for new construction?
We don't. DEM does.
Yeah. Okay.
So everybody has to have a D-Nite, and that is in the South Shore area, but it actually even crosses Route 1 in and around the ministerial area. So there is a pretty big significant area that requires denitrification on every new. So even if somebody is updating their system, they're required to do denitrification. They can't just fall back on what they have existing. It's not a grandfather thing.
Gotcha. A couple of questions for Alicia. You said that there's 27 sites that you do water testing on, and did you say that that's the bulk of the expenditures that you have is to execute that water testing? Sorry, it's one of our first meetings that have these, where everyone has these mics, so we're working the kinks out.
So it's a very large portion of our budget because, like I said, we also do additional bacteria sampling at some of the sites. So some of the sites cost closer to almost $1,000 to do, just because we wanted not to have only just one bacteria sampling per month. We want to have two because a lot can happen in a month.
So for all of those sites, you're doing 2 tests per month?
For 10 bellwether sites across the ponds, we do extra bacterial testing. For the rest of the sites, it's one big test for bacteria per month. Because the thought is that we're hitting the sites where we know that they're usually the most impacted. So, for example, I want to say one of the ones up near the top of Point Judith Pond is one of those sites. I actually have the bacteria data with me. I could look. Because we know that if something's going on, that site's probably going to spike, and we want to be able to capture that.
No, I mean, even once a month is great. The conversations we've had about water testing with Friends of the Saugatucket, they do these bacterial blitz tests, but that's twice a year, I think. So,
just to give you guys an example, so every week during our sampling season, a spreadsheet like this gets updated. I highlighted the sites that are in South Kingstown, specifically for both sets. So every 2 weeks, this updates. Most of the sites update every once a month. Some sites update every 2 weeks.
and this is available online?
Yeah. So
What's the website for that?
our website.
Okay.
So this is what, as the sampling season goes on, we will add this. And if anybody ever wants data, like I'm happy to share. I can, pull data that you guys might want. But this goes up in real time. That's who we run our samples through. So we actually predate the Watershed Watch. And we were one of the first groups that started. So all of our data since 1980, there's a few gaps, and we've had funding issues, before, a long time ago before I started, where not everything's completely consistent, but it's actually pretty well done. And so we have all of that data from year to year. It's the data that I use and I point to. What I wanted to say is, so just so you guys know a little bit about our structure, we have a 15-person volunteer board. All the pond watchers are volunteers, the coordinators are volunteers. There's myself and one other staff person. So I'm not going to say that some of our money doesn't go into our budget, but I do all the education programs. I just don't sit there. If something a flyer's created, it's either myself or my coworker. Like we don't usually, we do have a volunteer who helps us with some of the design stuff, but I'm always, finding people to help or doing it myself. So that's the other big part, putting money into our educational programs, buying supplies, things like that. But this is definitely the bulk of what we do. And yeah, our data is available online in real time.
So if someone goes online, Rich mentioned that this is the same testing that Watershed Watch is involved with. But so if you went on Watershed Watch's website and looked at that data, those are all samples that you or your volunteers have taken. They're not doing separate testing.
Those are all us.
Awesome.
So for the most part, I know a couple of, I think Camp Fuller might have a site that they monitor. I know that sometimes the towns have certain sites that they monitor, but also, for example, to give you an idea of collaboration, if there's an area that you're worried about for some reason, we did this in Narragansett where they were worried about a particular area. We happen to have a site very close to that, but not in the spot that they wanted. They pay for the site annually, but I find the volunteer, I coordinate all that, so they don't have to actually do any of the legwork. They just pay for the site, and then once a year I give them the data. So those are ways that if there's something that you're worried about or you want an eye kept on, that's something that we can add into our program because we already have the existing structure, and to find one more volunteer and add one more sample to our retinue isn't that hard for us to do. There you go. Yeah. So Veronica. Yeah, and that's the same exact thing we do. Ours is every other Wednesday from May through October. So same idea as November. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm pleased to hear that this much testing is going on. I think that we've sort of echoed this point in the past on the Concom that data sets can drive action, and you have to accrue it year after year. And sometimes something that you're trying to improve upon isn't immediately clear until you have 10 years of data, or 40 years of data.
Well, so to give you an example on that, and this is another thing that we do. So for the Charlestown Septic Grant, we do the surface water quality testing for that. So we use that as, our volunteer time is matched for the grant, which adds up. They have given us money for the sites, we use that, and then we give the volunteers match. But to your point, we've been testing a site for them, I want to say for close to 5 to 7 years, and we saw our first turnaround. It's taken a while, but we finally saw the numbers actually reverse course. We saw them slowing, and now we actually see nitrogen going down at one of the sites that we've been looking at, where they've done a lot of remediation. So that's what is so helpful. When they dredged the breachways, I was able to look at data pre and post breachway, and this was a few years ago, and kind of to look at that data. So having the data sets there really does help, and we've tried to be strategic. One of the board members, he's now passed, but he was a hydrologist, so he's actually the one who looked at the water flow in the salt ponds and picked the sites that we currently test. So they were done with thought.
And I know you said it earlier. Can you just say again what you're testing for?
Oh, yeah, actually, I have it back. We test for a lot of things. The primary things are dissolved oxygen, so looking for low oxygen conditions in the ponds, nutrients, so specifically because it's saltwater, we look more at nitrogen than phosphorus, so nitrates, nitrites, and total nitrogen. Bacteria, we look at 2 different types. We look at fecal coliform, and I can never say it, and I can't say it, enterococcal, both 2 types of things that would come out of animals, people, but one is correlated to the shellfish standard, and one is correlated to the swimming standard. And most people don't realize it is possible to shellfish in a place where you can't swim, and you can swim in a place you can't shellfish. So that's why we monitor for both. And then we also look at pH, which we haven't really seen a change in, but temperature we definitely, like I said, we've seen the higher highs staying longer, salinity, concentration of chlorophyll, and then water clarity for our deep sites. We do sucky depth. So.
Thanks for reiterating that. A topic that's come up in the CONCOM a lot in the past year or two is hydrilla, and I don't know if the Salt Pond Coalition has had any experience with hydrilla.
So I don't have to worry about hydrilla.
Yeah, okay.
It will not go down the Saugatucket that far to make it into Point Judith. But my other hat as Rivers Council, I have heard a lot about hydrilla.
Of course.
So yes, I am familiar with that.
The salinity is saving you from hydrilla.
Okay. I love good salinity. Well, we do have, just for the record, we do have other invasive species. So we have our clinging jellies, which was a big problem in Potter Pond. I want to say in 2019, a guy actually got sent to the hospital due to clinging jellies. They're small, but if you go through a patch of eelgrass and there's a bunch of them, I've gotten stung. It's not fun. And then we have a couple of other species. Frag is probably our plant that we always worry about, but on the other hand, it prevents erosion, and it's really hard to get rid of. So, take the good with the bad. But we don't have a hydrilla.
Good to hear.
I'm wondering about the dredging. Is there going to be any dredging to flush out the Green Hill Beach? I saw that one spot where you're doing so well with the eelgrass growing is almost exactly where the dredging needs to happen. So perhaps maybe you don't want to get rid of that. It's kind of close to where the kayak center, I think. Is that it?
So I know that there has been a couple of thoughts about dredging, and there's 2 separate areas. One is the actual underneath the creek bridge, and then the other is the Lynx Channel. From what I understand, and I am not a hydrologist, is that you can't get that channel to enough of a depth to cause enough of circulation that it will have a significant difference in pollution levels. That's the other thing. So I've never paid the bills other than we've helped with shortfalls when Quaney got dredged, and in about 2 weeks, we raised like $500,000, which is a lot for us to raise. But to just mobilize the dredge can be about close to $1 million. And so to try and just dredge the creek channel, I don't think it passes the common sense like cost-benefit analysis test. If we were doing it in conjunction with something else, maybe, but you also have to know what the full ramifications are, and that's, to make sure that it would actually make sense to invest the money into doing that. And from my understanding, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. If there were flushing options, there's been a couple of different options that have been explored, and I have opinions on which ones I guess are more helpful than others, but I'd have to see what the actual engineering studies come back with.
Anybody else have any questions for us?
Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. And I've already learned a lot. I'm just curious to hear more how you're collaborating with some of the other towns. So we touched on septic upgrades. We touched on collaborative testing sites. But could you share more what you're doing with those other towns?
So it depends on the town's needs. So, for example, in Westerly, we did a shellfish planting program with them where we helped to put shellfish in one of the spawner sanctuaries. This was, I think, back in 2020. We helped to coordinate with them, DEM, and we were able to get shellfish transplanted into that and rehabitat the spawner sanctuary. Sometimes we help with programming. We've worked with the town's recreation departments, things like that, if they need, either help with the kids program or they want, somebody to come in and teach about something at a festival or things like that. We've done that kind of stuff. So it's really just kind of, for the most part, we've usually been the outreach branch of things. And then the other thing that is, I don't want to say service we provide, that's a weird way of saying it, but I will say our president, he worked at DEM for close to 40 years, and he worked on the salt ponds. He lives on the salt ponds, he worked on the salt ponds. So usually when you need somebody to kind of go back into that institutional knowledge as to why something was done, he's normally the one that I'll be like, all right, time to go to a meeting. And he's a great resource for that kind of stuff, because he worked, he was there when the North Cape oil spill happened. He was there when the South Shore Restoration Program happened, and he was the boots on the ground person at the time. So he's also great for institutional knowledge or explaining why something biologically. If I don't know the answer, he normally does. Shellfish are not my specialty, but they are his. I'm more of a bigger animals girl. I like the fish and that kind of stuff. So between us, if there's a question as to what an impact might be or a concern we might raise, that's what we do. And for example, we raised the concern with the town of Narragansett. I don't know if you know where Harbor Island is, but the causeway that connects Harbor Island to shore, there's two coves, and Long Cove especially is impacted with water quality. So we've been working with them, helping to provide match funds and things like that for, first we actually just raised the money to do with the community of Harbor Island. We raised money, we got our own contractor in to be like, this is a problem, we think there's going to be, let's do a study. And then we brought that study to the town, and because we had enough momentum behind us, we've applied for grants. We act as a partner, we do the match. If there's anything that needs to be written that I can write, I help with that. And so it's just a collaborative effort so that if there's something that needs to get done, we just help do it. And then, like I said, and then once we actually get the grant, sitting in, helping to advise, seeing what needs to be done. If there's meetings, public outreach, stuff like that needs to happen, we help to schedule that, get people there, get the community involved. So it's just kind of, that's more or less a lot of what we do.
Yeah, it sounds like you individually are doing a ton of heavy lifting as well. So just thank you and kudos for doing all that. You mentioned the two sides of the Harbor Island Causeway. Which one is experiencing
The northern side.
The northern side,
So
okay.
the side that the Saugatucket kind of dumps into.
Gotcha.
So from what I understand, it used to be, the causeway used to be intertidal, so at high tide it would actually flood all the way back into the 90s. Whether this is lore or not was that a school bus got stuck on the causeway at high tide. And so they just backfilled it to make it so that the channels were cut off. So you cut off that water flow too. So, you know, there's some nice marsh areas, but now what's happening is Long Cove is really stagnant. Champlin still has some flow. So they want to raise the road for resiliency. So that's kind of my other hat is I'm on the state's climate change study commission and all of that kind of stuff. So not that I'm a total expert in it, but like when we want to talk about resiliency and climate change, it's another conversation of what we do. But we're raising the road to make it so that, you know, going forward it's better for the community, but also we're constantly advocating, can we put in a culvert? Can we put in a little something, just to get that water flushing going back and forth, and that way we're kind of restoring the ponds to what it should have been done in the first place.
Yeah, that dovetails into my next question, which was, I was a couple weeks ago, I was in a Green Infrastructure Coalition meeting, and someone from TNC was talking about the money that's available for climate resiliency and stormwater mitigation issues. I know that Rich has gotten some funding through that, but is there grant funding that we could be applying for that might be satisfying missions that both Salt Pond Coalition and the town of South Kingstown have on their radar? Yeah. Is there money that's on the table that we haven't pursued yet?
Information I better, you guys are applying to a lot of the same grants.
So we did just receive, we received $85,000, I think, for design at Saugatucket, the roadway, over the Saugatucket River. And then we received another $750,000 for the construction part of that, because we have to widen the culvert out. We have to create a situation where we don't have so much flooding in the smaller storms even. So, and that all came through the infrastructure bank.
Yeah.
And I believe we've pursued other dollars from Matunic. You know, we have regular flooding on Matunic Beach Road, goes over into the trailer park there. And we haven't been successful on that, but those are the places we've focused for resiliency issues. Other things that we're looking at doing, you know, I've been a real proponent of I want to see a watershed study of the Saugatucket for resiliency purposes. I believe that time of concentration is a big part of our problem. I think that everything's coming all at once, through Peacedale in particular. But there is a project going on, you know, and I frankly don't know enough about it. It was a state initiative to handle a number of villages throughout the state. Peacedale is one of them, and they're going to look at all the flooding problems and try to come up with some sort of plan to help it. But it's for like 20 different sites throughout the state. And I believe that was driven, I think that the engineer on that was Wood and Kern. I can't remember where those dollars came from though. So that's ongoing. But I think that all of that, I think, kind of dovetails into us doing a study of the entire Saugatucket. At some point we have to. You know, the Village Green isn't getting any drier. And you know, downtown, everybody thinks downtown floods and stuff. It really doesn't. Not quite like Peacedale. Peacedale's pretty bad. And I think that we have to also move on to the Saugatucket for, you know, our next water quality initiative. So we have to start looking at, you know, because the upper pond, the Salt Pond, is, you know, Saugatucket's a very big part of whatever pollutants happening in the upper pond. I mean, we don't really have a lot of development on Salt Pond all the way out. You know, there's not a lot going on. There are some farms and things, but there's not as much development, particularly as, you know, specifically with regard or looking at Narragansett. You know, Narragansett has far more residential along that area than we do, but we do supply a lot of water from the Saugatucket. And I think that's our next initiative. I think that's where we go. But, you know, we'll let DEM coach us on that. The last time when we did some work in Middlebridge, then we looked to DEM to say, where are we going next? And we suggested, you know, because Dennis was pushing so much. Did you ever meet Dennis? Did you ever? So, you know, Dennis was pushing pretty hard, and he can be, you know, he can be tough, but it was to his benefit, and it worked. And I got to give him credit for that. But DEM agreed, you know, the Green Hill Pond would be a great place to do some work, and that's why we went over to Green Hill Pond. Next, maybe Saugatucket, we'll have to talk with DEM about it. But, you know, again, so a lot of this has to do with our MS4 permit. So we have to, every year, you know, show that we're doing something towards TMDL. And we reference all of this in our permit. So we have to keep up, we have to keep going, we have to do something. So once we get this construction done in Green Hill, then we'll figure out what we're going to do. But, you know.
Thank you. This was total coincidence that both these agenda items were scheduled for the same night, but Rich is proving a useful addition to the meeting. I don't have any further questions. I don't know if any other Concom members do, but Alicia, thank you for coming tonight. I was wholly unaware of all the things that the Salt Pond Coalition was doing, and as I said earlier, I'm really pleased to hear about all the water testing, or water quality testing. And
I didn't get into it too much tonight, but just so you guys do know, if you ever want me to come back and if there's certain sites that you're very interested about water quality, I've done that for the Narragansett Harbor Commission and a couple of other commissions where I will come and I'll just give a broad strokes look at water quality so that if there's something that you're very curious about, I'm happy to come back.
yeah, absolutely. I know in the past we've gotten sort of annual reports from Friends of the Saugatucket, yeah, I don't see why this couldn't be a similar situation. So we'll definitely be in touch in the future.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I have a digital copy of our agenda tonight, so it takes me a second to call it up. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is a continued discussion on the Commission's tree stewardship resources, town ordinance amendments, Tree City USA accreditation, and tonight a special discussion with the Director of Public Services, Rich Bourbonnais, who we've already heard from tonight, but we're happy to have him here. Rich, I don't know if there's... I'm not sure if there's... I know that Jay has briefed you on what we wanted to discuss tonight, but in short, I think the discussion is going to trend towards the tree warden and the duties of the tree warden, and I know that we've had an individual who's been in that role for a long time, and it sounds like that might be changing. I just heard between April's meeting and May that we might have a new tree warden that's already been hired, or it's in the works. So feel free to.
Well, so it's a new tree warden, but it's Bill Wallace III.
Got it. Yeah.
So we always sort of had. So we always. So you know, I'm still very happy that we went through this process. Bill Wallace has been you know, he's been here for a long time, since, 40 years, I think, something crazy. Bill Wallace III he's not been as, you know, he's active because he's always been working. When we do tree removal. So let me take a step back, okay? So this all came about that we even put it out because what our procurement administrator was saying was that we were putting out the emergency tree services coupled with the tree warden. And we really can't do that. We have to do some sort of competitive bid. Now, the council can appoint a tree warden however they see fit. And if the clerk puts somebody in front of them, even unbeknownst to me, they can approve that. And that's not something that I really necessarily have a whole lot of say over. But what we did here instead was we said, listen, let's just put it out, all of it. So because we might get a contractor that wants to do both, and it could be Wallace or whomever, but at least that time we we had to get it to a point where whoever we have is going to be online, because we do our permitting all online now. And we needed to make sure that whoever did this understood that and was going to participate in it. And so we had a number of meetings with a couple of the applicants to discuss just that. And we felt comfortable in the end, so we hired Bill Wallace III as our tree warden. And right now he's being set up with IT and everything, so he'll be our guy. Now the tree emergency services went to, I'd never heard of them before, but they're right out of North Kingstown.
That's fine.
I may remember in a minute.
In the past, the emergency tree services, has that been a mix of companies? I feel like I've seen more than one company doing that work.
So what we did in the past was, so there's two things. We have emergency tree services, and then we have our annual tree contract where we go out, and those are trees that aren't, they don't have to happen today. So, we have a number of trees in town that need to come down for whatever reason. They're still kind of okay. The tree warden has already approved of their removal. We've posted them. And then we hire a contractor, a separate contract altogether. And the money's separated differently. It's like, $30,000 for the emergency tree services, $40,000 for the annual tree removal contract. And actually, it's the way it's structured is a tree removal contract, and then there's professional services. The tree warden, the emergency tree service comes out of professional services.
And the tree warden receives a $5,000
It's a stipend, $8,880.
Okay, and that comes out of that same professional.
I believe it does, yeah.
Okay.
But that may be a separate line item. That may be a separate, I don't know. I can't remember, but there may be a separate line item for that. As a stipend, it's a stipend.
In a perfect world, in Rich Bourbonnet's dream scenario, would you have a larger budget for the tree warden? Or is that not a role that you think needs expansion? Do you feel like...
The tree warden, I don't believe the tree warden needs expansion. I'd love to have a lot more money for our tree removal services. Right, so we're shuffling money around. I mean, we had one year where we did $80,000 in work, and the problem is that when we have storms, we're losing a lot of trees, and they're cutting off roads, and they're falling on people's houses literally. And so I'm concerned about that. And with the ash problem, and now we're rolling into a beach problem. I mean, it just seems to be one thing after another, and so I'm a little concerned. National Grid or Rhode Island Energy has been tremendous help. And if they even have a tree on the other side of the road that's dead, they will remove it if there's a potential that tree might fall across the road and hit their lines. So they've been just a tremendous asset. I mean, they've done, it's uncountable how many, And they're not being overzealous with it. They're being careful. They're not removing trees that are perfectly healthy or whatever. And we generally look at what they're doing. But no, I do not think that, generally speaking, I don't know what the expansion would be, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've envisioned, or I've seen in some other towns, I think Barrington and Jamestown, have tree warden positions that the duties to which are larger, a full-time position versus a part-time stipend position, and seem to, I haven't done a deep dive into their daily activities, but seem to include more prevention and care and just health checkups of the tree populations in those towns versus like a reactionary role that the South Kingstown tree warden seems to have, or not reactionary, but like something's wrong, can you go check, or someone's complained about something, can you go check up on it, versus someone who's just like punching in every morning to go through the trees that exist in the town.
Well, we do have that. I mean, we do have an arborist.
Okay.
And we have a tree arborist on staff with Highway, and what they're doing exclusively is just running through town and cleaning up trees.
Right.
So they're not able to take down a tree without tree warden authorization, But we don't even have, I don't believe we have the equipment to even remove a tree that's large enough. We don't have cranes, we don't have any of that, so we don't even do it. All they're doing is just cleaning up trees, making them a little healthier in a sense. But they are reviewing every tree on every street, and they work in groups, so that they work in zones. So they handle sort of a particular area, or a particular road, or a particular neighborhood, and they move from neighborhood to neighborhood. They're going all the time through the season. So, and they get pulled off. We only have 15 highway guys, so they get pulled off to do other things when it's necessary. But even they've done tree plantings as well, and they'll do that. So we do have an arborist on staff, and he punches in every day. It's just that we need the tree warden by state requirement and by local ordinance to make the final approval for any tree removals. And even tree trimming, we will get some, recommendations on some tree trimming. Not much, not all of it's necessary, but for some of it, and they're available for that. The stipend covers that.
So in our previous couple meetings, we've discussed making some changes to the tree ordinance, or not. We've just been going through that document and evaluating whether or not we were happy with the existing language. And I'll just extend to you that if there's anything you have thought, this wording could be improved upon, or I'd actually like it to say this or not say this, feel free to. You don't have to address it tonight.
I can tell you, I do look at the order, and what's always been strange to me is that the Concom is the tree board, and the tree board is referenced in the ordinance. It's clear that there is a role to be played, and we haven't really worked. And my predecessor, I can't say what his thoughts were, but we certainly haven't worked, and I haven't in the past few years, in a direction where, to give you an example, someone might call and say, listen, I want this tree removed. The tree warden says no. That homeowner really doesn't have any recourse. Or it could be the other way around. We might say we want a tree removed, it's in town property, and they might say no. And we did have that. It was in Middlebridge. It was a good example. So in Middlebridge, one person that lived over here didn't like this tree in front of this guy's house. Well, this guy didn't like this person. And says, you know what? And that tree was half on their property, half on the other. Now, the tree was nearly dead. And so he says, no, you can't touch that tree. It's half mine, and I'll take you to court. You can't touch it. I said, well, we're taking it down. I don't know what to tell you, but we got to take it down because it's dangerous. But they had no recourse. And it would have been a nice opportunity, and I think that going forward we could integrate this board into that. But it's already spelled out in the ordinance. It's not like a change is needed. It's just that we have to figure out and identify, listen, if you have a problem, if somebody calls, I want to be able to say, you have a problem. You can go to the Concom. They can review everything. The tree warden will be there. And they can make a decision either or. But now, at the end of the day, the tree warden is the only one that has the authority to remove a tree. That's it. He's the only one, and we don't even remove trees unless we talk with him or if he authorizes it. So the Concom can offer an opinion on that, and the tree warden can, go one way or the other.
I've seen Is there a volume? No, you made reference to National Grid and what they've done at times. I've been commuting on Ministerial Road in the past and have seen pretty extensive amount of work, progressive and very creative. I mean, they'll look for a way to keep a tree, but truly keep it from being a concern. And they would spend days there, working their way from top to bottom. So I'm curious, to what extent is that a sort of a systematic aspect of managing the trees? Because it's being done to some degree ahead of the game, trying to prevent problems with something falling down in the worst times. is that something that's sort of built into the town's expectations on an annual basis?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, I can't, Ministerial Road is a state road, so we're only able to even discuss what's happening within town property, including town parks. Again, parks are referenced in the ordinance as well, and any town lands, the tree warden has to make those approvals. So the Parks Department does rely on the tree warden. The planning board will rely on the tree warden. They'll say, we want the tree warden to look at a tree before you remove it from the property, or how you're protecting the tree. We have one now, and we want to make sure the tree warden approves how they're protecting the tree. So there's a process on that end where when he's asked to do something, he does it, and that gets relayed back to whoever requested it. As far as like the removal of trees that's happening with Rhode Island Energy, we are required, you'll see postings, and they do post. They'll usually tape something. There have been situations where they did not do that, and we've been called on it. I believe that your predecessor here had a tough time with some trees that were removed, and they weren't notified. And we try to rectify that. So there is a process to it, where the tree has to be posted for a certain period of time, and then so everybody is aware of it. But I mean, there's a process.
Good.
And again, the tree warden has to approve every removal. We don't take them down.
How many, I'm sure this number isn't in your pocket, but ballpark, do you know how many trees the tree warden in a given year is evaluating? This could be an email later, but
No, I have no idea how many trees. I have no idea. And in the past, though, it has slowed down a little bit because, we had a situation where it was just it was a clumsy situation. And, but, like every tree, which be 20 or 30 or more, that we remove as part of that tree removal contract, those are all reviewed and approved by so, right off the bat, you've got those, and then every time somebody calls, there's a review. I mean, it could be another 20 or 30 of those, too, so, in a given year. We get a lot. Of trees. And then we have trees that are removed, just, people take them down. We had two on Silver Lake recently. One of them was a beautiful tree, and people didn't want it. They called the company came in and took it down. And so now they go to municipal court. They haven't responded to the summons, so that'll be fun.
What's the penalty for
$2,500.
$2,500 for the removal, unauthorized removal of a tree?
Yeah, that's the maximum that we have in our ordinance.
Okay. They don't take into account like age or species or anything like that. It's just
No, but I've been doing appraisal. I'm a landscape architect, so I'm an engineer, but I'm also a landscape architect. So I've been doing appraisals, tree appraisals. And, when you remove a tree, what I find is you remove a tree that's, 30 inches across, I mean, that's a $30,000 to $40,000 tree. Just on a simple, quick appraisal, it's at least that. So when we look to, you're not going to plant that, right? So
Can you expand on that
buy
just a tiny bit? How are those calculations being made? Is it like the value of the lumber, or like the shade?
Well, I mean, you look at the general health. There's a number of factors. First, it starts with it's done in cubic centimeter. The cubic centimeters. Square centimeters of the tree itself. It starts with that, and then you back out the replacement cost for a tree of comparable quality, but not. Obviously, you're not going to put back a tree that big. So you would say, like, I want to spend $2,000 to put back whatever it is, an Acer rubrum, and if I buy it, if it's a 3-inch, 4-inch caliber tree, it's going to cost that. So you kind of back out those numbers, and then you start looking at, well, was the tree in good health? Is the tree a desirable tree? And some of it's a little bit subjective. But much of it is pretty quantitative in a sense. So you might say, well, it's the quality. It's a common tree. It's not a real popular tree, but so you give it maybe an 80%. So you keep kind of whacking that total number down, and come up with kind of pops out of the data.
Yeah, yeah, I know that.
I can't give you exactly what it is. I've got it all. I created a spreadsheet, so I just have to type in them.
No, that's fine.
Keep it
I know that
interesting.
Office
Square.
of Compliance and Inspection, I think has a document that they reference. when
Yeah,
they
this
go
is
out.
the AAN,
This is-
this
that's
is the
the
AAN,
one.
this is the, there's a particular arboriculture type guide that carries this whole process, and that's what I used.
Yeah.
It was the same, when I was working with DOT, I did the same thing. When anybody plows into a tree, the insurance company gets a bill. And we used to appraise them, so it happens all the time.
Yeah, I've been working for Audubon Society of Rhode Island, and we have to do annual property monitoring, and we're running into this issue with abutters who are clearing past their property lines, and we've just sort of been having that discussion of how to handle it. But yeah, that idea of the value of each of those trees that they remove.
Now, again, we have a maximum value, we can have a maximum we can ask, but this is just justification for the 2,500. What was I going to say? So often what I'll do, though, and what I have done is I've said I wanted the homeowner, because the homeowner doesn't know, and it's shame on them, but the tree removal company, we see regular sort of frequent flyers in a sense. So I'm more interested in stopping them, and it's like doubly shame on them because this one particular company that I'm dealing with now they were our tree contractor at one point. So they know we have ordinance, like they know. So I'm going after that. But with the homeowner, what I'll do is I'll say I want to see a replacement. And I'm not always concerned. And they'll say, well, I had to remove because my sewer line's there, blah, blah, blah. So I'll say, well, fine, but let's just find an alternate spot. And even if it's a little bit on that property or if it's whatever, and it may not be a comparable, it may not be as big a tree because maybe some of the properties are very small, and the tree took up the whole property. And it was destroying everything. It was falling on the house. I mean, we get it. So we will allow tree removals in those situations. The fact that they didn't tell us is the problem, really. If they're going to put a driveway in and it's going through a tree, we'll
And again, this is only pertaining to trees that are on town property. Or
solely
Yeah.
town property. It's on their property, and we get people all the time. We'll give them a violation. It turns out it was on their property all along, and we'll say, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Yeah, I think a lot of that confusion obviously can arise from homeowners not clearly knowing where that property line actually is. I think everyone thinks that it's the pavement or
Right.
or they think it's 8 feet from the pavement or whatever, and in fact, that line
Could be anywhere.
varies widely.
The other thing is they don't understand that there is an ordinance. They think it's in their property. They don't know that they even have a property line.
Yeah.
They think, they think the pavement's it. So, often I have to be careful because I look at plans all day, every day, and so, and he does too, and so we're very, very accustomed to it. But we forget that there are a lot of people out there that do not look at plans every day, and they may have never looked at a plan. And so we have to be a little bit cognizant of that, and we try to be forgiving in a sense, but at some point, if it's just, I just didn't like looking at it, then it's like, well, that's a big problem.
You mentioned wanting to, I don't know if you said go after, but wanting to involve the tree companies that are doing these removals in some of the liability or something like that. Is there anything that could be done to spell that out more clearly or to create a document or create a situation where they would have liability? Because like you said,
Well, they do.
they know what they're
Well, they
doing.
do. They're still, the way the solicitor, I said, well, can I make the homeowner put back a tree? And they said, well, but if you're robbing a bank, it's not just the guy robbing the bank, it's the person driving the car as well. So they're all sort of culpable. And whether the person, that owns the home hires this person to cut down a tree, it's all spelled out in the ordinance that you can have somebody do it or you can do it yourself. Either way, that's the problem. So I can go after both. And, but it's spelled out exactly. I have a $2,500 limit. What more would I be able to do?
Well, like legally, does the tree company have a leg to stand on to say, it's assumed that the due diligence has been done by the homeowner, or that an engineering firm has clarified where the property line is, or something. Like, we're being brought in and told to remove this tree, but like, it's a good faith
Well, they
situation
can't,
that,
they can't, because the way our permit is structured is that the homeowner could make application, but they have to tell us who's cutting down the tree and if they're licensed. And they have to be licensed to work, so there's the other angle, is that they're also in violation of our right-of-way permit, which requires that you are licensed and insured to work in the town right-of-way, no matter what you're doing. So, you know, we've kind of got a double whammy, and I'm of the opinion, you the solicitor decide, but I'm of the opinion there's no way to get around that. You know, they're in violation, in multiple ways. And when we issue the notice of violation, when I sent them, these companies, notice of violation, it lists out multiple areas. It's, you're working, you're not a licensed contractor to work in the town, you're working in the town right of way without a permit, and you removed a tree, you know, so there's multiple things going on. Each one has its own fine, but I haven't tested the waters on whether I can find them all three, maybe $2,500 a pop.
consecutive
Three different
licenses.
violations, right, yeah. I haven't questioned that yet. But.
Thanks, man. Need to press down on the mic.
You know what I think happened is that these things come out, because I
Yeah.
just pushed this one in.
It worked on this one too.
Okay, cool.
Rich, thank you for being here. We haven't met yet. Kate Sherrick, I'm new to the Concom. A couple of questions, and I apologize if you answer this. How many times a year are we dealing with residents cutting down trees in the town right away? I mean, how frequently?
So it comes in spurts. But I would say, you know, how many times do we catch them? Maybe 3.
Okay.
Okay, so we do, most often, I'll send something to the homeowner, they'll replace it right away. They didn't know or whatever, so they'll replace it right away.
So it's not, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just was going to add on to that and ask if you've ever gotten a feeling like someone just was aware of the $2,500 fine and just saw it as a part of the cost of
I've not
removing
had
that
that.
tree.
I've not had that.
Yeah, it's just people
You know,
typically.
sometimes people get pretty indignant. They say, you know what, that's stupid, and we're not going to do it, or, you know, and so, and that's fine. But I've not had anybody say, oh yeah, I knew that, and we just figured we could get away with it. That's not happening.
Okay.
I mean, they paid $1,000 or more, maybe if it's a big number. We had somebody up on over in town. They removed 5. Actually, 4 were Kwanzaa cherries, and they were beautiful Kwanzaa cherries. They were big. I think they went in when the original development. They could be 40 years old. They were big ones. Not the best street tree, right? I mean, if they had come in and requested a permit, I would have probably entertained, come back with something else. You know, we'll work around whatever utility lines you have, you know, and we probably could have come up with an alternative. They could have taken them down at their expense, and then we would have, but they did not. They did 5, actually, and there was another ash tree they took down. So we went to court. They had an attorney, and we went back and forth, and the last meeting that we had, the attorney didn't even show up, so the judge just made a decision. It was $2,500. So they've already paid, that guy probably already paid $2,000 or $3,000. So now another $2,500 on top of that.
Per tree?
No. So that's another one I got a question. So, you know, I was tempted on that one too to say, you know, I got to talk to the solicitor about that. It could be that each tree is treated as a separate offense. That
Feels
could
like it ought to be. Yeah.
should be.
Could clear your whole
But I could
lot
also
for
say to
$2,500.
I could also say to the homeowner that's $2,500 and say to the contractor it's $2,500. They don't always tell you who did it, by the way. I've had some where they say, no, I'm not telling you who cut it down.
Interesting. Okay. And my question, so I don't want to minimize the loss of 3 trees a year, and yes, there's probably happening beyond that. We just haven't caught them. But you mentioned earlier that, to ask a question, that instead of expanding the budget for the tree warden, you'd like to expand the budget for emergency services or the more reactive needs that we have, despite Rhode Island Energy being a huge help. I guess my question is, like, as a conservation commission, from a tree perspective, like, what should we be focused on? So we're not losing a lot of trees because residents are cutting them down illegally, some, but not a lot. But what is it, we're losing a lot of trees due to aging out, weather, climate change, what have you. So what is the focus that we should maybe have? Because that to me is the bigger issue than the residents illegally cutting downtown trees. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say we lose a lot of trees due to weather. What'll happen a lot of times is you lose maybe a significant branch of a tree, and then the rest of the tree's got to come down. That type of thing, where the tree is so lopsided, it's got to come down. That happens much more frequently than does somebody removing a tree that shouldn't. But those, when somebody removes a tree that shouldn't, that's, even the trees that people remove, that really needs to be orchestrated, I think, by the tree warden. We'll work on that. But those trees that are coming down because of weather issues and all that, that's a big part of the tree warden stuff. Okay. As far as like how to expand on how the Concom interacts with the tree warden and with DPS in general, probably should include even our annual tree removal list, and just to let this board know exactly what's going on out there. That's something we could certainly work on. So I think, and those things again are all in the ordinance. It's not, I don't think an ordinance change is necessary to make that happen. It's just a matter of changing DPS's frame of mind on how we handle these issues, and we can do that. Yeah. I can work with Jay on that.
I have one. Can I talk about the Tree USA that we were bringing him here to ask him about?
Sure.
All right, so we are thinking about, I know Narragansett already is a member of this, and it's a program that's put on by the Arbor Day Foundation, and we were considering possibly getting South Kingstown into the Tree USA program. And we know that we are already, there's 4 standards that we have to meet. We have a public tree care ordinance. You've mentioned it quite a bit tonight, so we know we have that when we go to do our application, right? We have our tree board and department, so we're set with that. The question that we had, and then I contacted them since the last meeting, was the standard 3. We have to have a community forestry program with an annual budget of at least $2 per capita. And we wanted to know if you could tell us, do we already meet that, and what exactly would that be? Are we like 30,000 people right now?
Yeah,
So it would
so
be
I
around
think-
60,000?
I think 64, 65,000
Yeah, I think
was the
that's
number
what we thought. Can I just cut myself off? So basically, do you feel like we're already meeting the $2 per capita? It sounded like when you were talking numbers earlier, I was adding it up in my head, and we kind of went over that with
Yeah,
the different
we certainly
divisions.
meet that.
Yeah. So we would be able to say yes on that.
The tree warden, tree budget in
Yep.
general is greater than that.
Okay,
But the only concern I would have with that requirement is it's specifically referencing the forestry program. We don't really have a forestry program necessarily.
well, like our tree board and a conservation, I don't think they're looking for you to be like a full-scale arborist. They want people, how many did we say there were? They're like 30,000.
You know what, I'm gonna take that back. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like we met that.
And then if you were to include the staffing and the materials for our arborist work as well, which really is a forestry program in effect, in a sense, certainly the budget goes beyond $2 per person in time. It certainly goes beyond that.
It wasn't really tightly defined as to what kind of spending it needed to be, and I imagine all sorts of things.
Yeah, I'll read you
But just
this
so we're clear,
paragraph.
our tree budget is pretty
They
big.
sent a paragraph, because I asked them, I went back and forth with a couple of emails, like specifically what exactly is that $2 need to be spent on? So it's like, to meet the standard each year, the community must document at least $2 per capita towards the planting, the care, the removal of city trees, the planning efforts to make these things happen. At first, this may seem like an impossible barrier to some communities. However, a little investigation usually reveals that more than this amount is already being spent on tree care. If not, this may signal serious neglect that will cost far more in the long run. So you should consider having it put into place. But you've already told us that this is not a problem.
We're definitely spending that.
Yeah, so that's, we just wanted to make sure before we sent in our
Did
application.
you say there were 4 items or 3?
The fourth one is that an Arbor Day observance must be made and proclamation happen. So we're thinking about trying to get that together for next year's Arbor Day, because it just passed and this came up like with a month. We did not have time to get it done.
Can I ask what this American program does? What is it? What is it called?
It's called the Tree City USA, and it's through the Arbor Day
Tree City
Foundation.
USA, sorry.
It's quite popular in a lot of communities.
What is it?
It doesn't like do anything, I don't think. It just establishes that your community is tree lovers.
You get to attach a sign under the Rotary Club and Elks Club sign at the Wakefield exit. You get to put another sign.
Yeah, it's really pretty much like that. It's not like anybody does anything, except we honor trees on Arbor Day and have a day. And usually, when I've been involved with it in my life in the past, it's been things like selling flowering crab trees for to make some money for a scouting troop, or Christmas trees, or like different things. But I would like to almost get in touch with now, because we decided to delay this for next year and try to get ready to have some Arbor Day thing if we're going to follow through.
When's Arbor Day?
It just happened.
Oh.
Yeah, like we just missed
April.
it. Yeah, it's in April. So we thought that maybe we could have a time to implement what's going on, and even talk to the people like in Narragansett. I had seen the sign there, and I guess Melissa was into it too. We had both kind of had seen it at the same time, and I thought, well, yeah, why aren't we doing it? So
And I think Melissa has had some communication with maybe members of the Concom from Narragansett that had pursued that accreditation. So she had gotten some.
I would think we certainly qualify for all of that. So. Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, it's an optics thing. I don't think there's a whole lot of meat that comes along with that. But
Well, what would be nice is if it opens you up to other opportunities like grants and things that are available. I mean, that's why it seems like we do everything around here. We try to make sure all of our options are there, and
Right.
it helps you secure other things. So.
And I think it's most, if not all, of those boxes are already being checked, and so it seemed to the Concom to be a why not,
I think it's a good idea. So good luck. The Arbor Day things, that should be easy. That's just going in front of the council.
If we have time. Rich, you mentioned, I believe, that the arborist on your staff is responsible for tree plantings. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. So.
Yeah, from time to time, yes.
Okay. Thank you for mentioning that we could be more coordinated around the tree removal list. I'm wondering how your team goes about deciding on plantings or replacement.
Well, so when there are violations, things like that over the years, the money goes to a specific account, and it's not robust, certainly. But the highway department also does have other funding that they use for those types of things. So
if there's a violation and someone pays that $2,500, that's
We have had-
specifically earmarked for.
it goes into a specific account for it's a tree. I can't remember what it's called, but there's a tree replenishment type fund that we have, and it goes into that and it sits there. And it does not go to the general fund; it sits there, and it's available to us if we wanted to replant, which I believe we're going to have to. I think the last time I was here, I talked about we have to do something on South Road.
All the trees that were.
Between
Allen's
they were all
Ave
ash and
Curtis Corner.
yeah, ash and then Rhode Island and those forests, but we have to do something, and in the back of my mind as a landscape architect, we thought it'd be great to have a little sort of an area cordoned off at one of these farms around here that are our trees, but the funding for that would be difficult. You got to have somebody tend to it and all of that, and I'm just not sure how that happens. Someday maybe, but not right now. Right now, we can go and purchase trees, and we get a wholesale cost and a wholesale value or wholesale expense, and then we can plant trees. And we did on Main Street through Peacedale, I think, or on Kingstown Road, or a couple years ago, and we still look for those opportunities.
Yeah, I know that you mentioned my predecessor. I know that there's been interactions between the Concom and DPS throughout the years, and I just want to reiterate that I really do not view us as as adversaries or as having different goals or missions. I think that part of the reason we wanted to invite you here tonight is just I value your input. I think we value your input. You have a lot of information behind the scenes, things that we're not necessarily considering. And I would just like to see, I think there's ways in which the Concom could help your department in speaking with the town council or bringing public attention to things that might allow you to get a bigger budget for some of these line items, or see a success in a way that you, as the director, going to the town council and requesting more money might not achieve. So, I appreciate
I actually think it goes the other way. I think that if there are things or projects or things that you think need to happen, I think you need to, relay that to Jay and specifically put that request to us. I think that also going forward, let me talk with the tree warden, I'll talk with Highway, and we'll figure out how to integrate this group into that discussion. And then that way you'll just be more in the know on some of these tree issues, in particular tree issues.
Yeah, I think you mentioned maybe being able to get an annual report or something to us about tree removals, or
That's easy enough.
Yeah, being in the know would be amazing.
Yeah, I think after listening, one of the questions I have for Rich is do you see the Concom/Tree Board playing a role more than just a mediator? We know that tree removal applications come to the Tree Board to mediate between the tree warden and the removal and all of that. With that being said, and that role set aside, in your opinion, and you might not have one, and that's totally fine, is there some other things that the Concom Tree Board can line themselves up with to help maybe further a town agenda or a town initiative or something that a role that they're not considering now that they don't know about? Or is there anything that, in looking to broaden their assistance in town services, is there anything that jumps out?
I just don't know what that would be.
Yeah, that's fine.
But we can learn.
Right, and that's kind of the discussion.
But I don't want to suggest, though, that every tree application is going to come to this board. That's just not the way we're structured.
No, I think the way that it's structured now is if there is a disagreement.
But that's not happening.
An appeal. If you will.
Yeah, an appeal. We're not, and that's a benefit to you all because at least you can be a part of that process and actually understand what's going on but I think that it's particularly important that the general public and the residents, have an option, and and maybe someone that listens. And so, rather than just me saying, just town center.
We can be the good cop to your bad cop. No, I do not want the Concom to be a headache for you. I don't want any of this discussion tonight or these requests to come off as there's one more thing that I need to do is keep the Concom in the loop. I don't want it to
It's not going
feel
to.
that way.
But that's why I'm saying what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not going to. So that's why I'm saying what I'm saying, because it'll benefit us if we have that ability. It's just very difficult for me when I know I've got to make. I make dozens of these decisions every day, and I get dozens of residents calling about something that they're ticked off about. Generally, the thing that people come out most, what drives people most, is their anger. And so there are a lot of times I have to make a tough decision. But I always question. So I never know if maybe it's not the right decision. Like, who am I to say on some of these things? So it'd be nice to have this backdrop. And it may not only be people that disagree. It may be even a tree that, I don't know. I mean, we just don't know. Highway might be saying this thing needs to come down. The tree warden saying no way, and I've got a homeowner that wants it gone, and maybe it's an opportunity to say, listen, let's just get another set of eyes on it. Not me, because I'm not neutral in this.
Right. and you might not be given, or DPS might not be given the good faith side of the argument. They may be seen as someone, I believe they have been seen as someone who is happy to remove a tree for reasons other than the health of the tree or the environment. And so I think there might be some legitimacy that the Concom could say, no, we are in agreement that this tree should come down, and like, I think we have maybe a reputation for being on the side of environmental decisions versus just practical utility decisions.
We'll have to see where it goes. The only thing I can warn you is that, again, the tree warden is the deciding vote. And, you know, I'd like to think that, I don't know what your interaction is. I know Bill Wallace was a very nice man. And I don't know what your interaction has been with Bill Wallace III, but he is a very nice man. And they are sincere. They love trees, and they're not swayed in any particular way. And
I didn't mean to imply that.
Very sound information.
I just want to add, just for context for everyone, that I've been with the town going on 7 years, 6.5 years, something like that. I've staffed this board the entire time. I think there has been one application, one night where you have sat as a tree board and listened to an appeal, and I think that was like 5.5 years ago, 5 years ago. It was a long time ago.
It might be more, because I don't recall it ever happening in my time on the committee.
So, you know, we're talking about this, but just to put some scope to this, it's not something that happens quite frequently. Is that a fault of process or the way that the ordinance is written or the way the design is? I don't know. But I think what Rich is saying is that, you know, collectively we'll look at it and see if there's room for opportunity to make it work better.
It might take a little bit to figure that out.
Right.
But we'll get there.
Yeah, and I in no way have any personal issue with the former tree warden or the incoming tree warden.
No, I don't think that you do. But
In all honesty, I have never met either of them, and so it just has sort of circled back several times and come to my attention that the Concom is the tree board. We've talked about these types of issues before, and I've never had any interaction with the tree warden. And so part of having you here is just to shed some light on what those responsibilities were and what was actually happening in the role of the tree warden. I would just hear these murmurings that there was, that the tree warden was in his 90s. I was curious personally, how often is he, and it may be incredibly spry and is going out to each of these sites, but it sounded like his son was filling in for the latter half or the latter part of his dad's time as the tree warden. And so the question of, well, why isn't the son just the named tree warden then? And so it was just clarifying
Bill Senior
some of
was
this stuff.
still going out.
Yeah.
You know,
And I'm really not trying to throw any offense to him. Again, I have not met this
no,
gentleman.
and I don't think that, but I'm just explaining that that
It just sounded
that,
like maybe
that,
the position was not
I
operating
just
the way it was
what I'm
intended
really
to.
trying to say with that comment that I made is that I don't think that, you know, even though they're the final say in it, I don't think that we should be concerned that they're stubborn in any way. No. They're still reasonable people.
Absolutely.
And that's all I'm saying by that.
I just wondered whether the position itself was functioning as intended. That was part of the reason for it.
We're meeting the letter of the law.
If I could just add one thing, I know both gentlemen fairly well. I mean, I have used them for services on my property. And what I can say is that they would seem to be doing their job and doing well, and knowing the area better than anybody, including myself. But I think it is a step forward that the town did go through a bid process this time, so that there was the same thing that state commitments are to who gets to fill roles in support of physical changes of various sorts in our properties and whatnot. So I think that's a good move, And I think it speaks well that they were competitive in that bid. So, I mean, you know, that's not somebody who had any issues with that they have, you know, they have a knowledge of the industry, and they've shown that. So that's good.
You know, they're well qualified. I think the tree warden is a stipend. The emergency tree services was a competitive bid in a sense. The tree warden is more of a request of qualifications. And Largest Forestry was who got the emergency tree services. I just remember the name. But as far as the tree warden goes, and so a couple things. Wallace did not bid on the emergency tree services. Okay, and I think, I don't know why. They just didn't bid on it. And we could speculate, but it's all good. Largest is only in North Kingstown, and part of the stipulation they got to be here within an hour or two or something. There's a lot of requirements there. As far as the tree warden goes, it's nice to have somebody in town. You know, because we need to be able to call somebody that can come off a job site and come over and look at a tree and then go. And also get online, do what they have to do, but they have to be in communication. So it works out. That's part of the reason why they were selected.
When the need for the tree warden to be involved with something occurs, how much time does the town have? You know, if someone says, I want this tree to come down, are they promised a certain amount of time?
I don't know what the requirement is on that. It may be in the ordinance if we have to respond in a certain period of time. If the request comes in, I don't know. Generally, we try in a few days to respond. In the past, it sometimes takes a long time. It's been taking a long time to get the tree warden out there to review the tree and all that. Hopefully that process will be made quicker because now they're going to be online. So what they'll do is they'll receive an email that they have to go on, and they'll look at the location. They'll go visit the tree, and they can respond, and then we'll be contacting them to make sure they make that response or they respond. In fact, the first thing really happens is we get it. We certify it complete. The property owners provided everything they need to. And then it goes, when we move it along, it goes to the tree warden. And then the town engineer will make the final decision. They click off on it, but the tree warden signs off on it. When he says approved or gives a reason why, no, the tree's in perfect health, we're not going to let you touch that tree.
And the tree warden's just checking the health of the tree. They're not the person from the town that comes out and determines whether or not it's on town property. That's a separate job.
So what we ask, we have two permit requests. One is a determination. That's where we determine whether the tree is even a town tree or not. And then if it is their tree, if it is a town tree, we say to the homeowner, if you want to pursue it, you got to go fill out this application. It's an online, again, they're all coupled together. And they have to provide us information about who they want as a contractor and all that. They have to do that at that point. Or, I got to look at it, but it's somewhere along those lines. Two separate processes. By the time they get to an application, by the time the tree warden gets it. That was another problem we were having. We had a paper application. Well, sometimes we weren't even determining whether, we would do it kind of all at one fell swoop, and it wasn't working. So, the online process will help us. We're just trying to get it going.
Okay, so as far as what...
Do you guys always do 2-hour meetings? Sorry. I can talk about the weather for 2 hours.
Final question, Rich. If there were things that we wanted to, if the Concom wanted to sort of get a briefing once a year from DPS, what are the types of information that you think would be included on that document? That you would be able to offer us about, like, the tree warden's activities?
I don't know. I mean, we're talking about trees, but there's a lot of things we do from an environmental sense. And,
Sure. Yeah.
Our MS4 permit is a very complicated, very big document. And, we, along the lines of environmental, I have someone who's staff, and he inspects every single catch basin in town every year. He inspects every single outfall, and it's 2,500 catch basins. it's another 700 outfalls, and test anything that's flowing. But they have to be flowing a certain amount of time after a certain storm, and there's requirements, only to do 20 or 30 testing that we actually do, but there's a lot that goes into it, and that all gets reported. You know, in addition to that, any of the water quality efforts we do, that all has to be reported on. I mean, there are a lot of bigger environmental type things we do beyond just trees. Trees is sort of the construction end, whereas the real more scientific end is really an MS4 permit. That's issued in March. It's for the previous year up to January, so we have 3 months to prepare it. So I think that would be an opportunity. I think that sort of that March, April, for us to come in and say, okay, this is what we've been doing this year. And then we'll be preparing our trees, and we'll be preparing, even just, there's asphalt. There's so much that we got going on.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
All right.
The resiliency, the resiliency stuff we're doing.
Right, and that's an increasingly huge topic on a state level. I really appreciate you coming out tonight. I'm sorry that the meeting ran for 2 hours, but I like this opportunity.
It was interesting. Alicia. I'm a little disappointed that she thinks that I take it personally. I'm particularly difficult. I don't think I'm a difficult person, and that's not what she said.
I didn't hear that as a personal attack.
I felt that vibe.
Yeah.
But anyways, I hope she reaches out, and then we can work with her in the future, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I look forward to having a positive interaction with all members of DPS in the future. Thank you for coming to the meeting, and I'm going to send you an email and just kind of recap a couple things. But
Same time next month.
all right, Rich, you're right. Rich, you're released from your duties. Thank you very much. Yeah. Feel free to hang around if you wish. But our final agenda item is just an update on the Southern Rhode Island Conservation District work on Old Tower Hill Road. Melissa's been spearheading this information, but she had, I just need to call up my email, she had sent a document that she just asked that I read. Because she wasn't here in person to give that update. So this is from Melissa Hughes. She said, I received an update in April from Gina Fuller, SRICD, a representative from SRICD, on the Old Tower Hill Road RIDOT project. She had received a response from contractors on April 3rd that workers were on site weeding that week. They have a budget through September and will be doing maintenance twice a month during this time. Money is also in the budget to mulch the entrance areas as well. When I have driven on this stretch of road, it has looked like the retention basins had been weeded. That's just a quick update. We've discussed in prior meetings that SRICD had been contracted or was the body that was responsible for hiring contractors to do that maintenance work on Old Tower Hill Road. So it sounds like that's going on. I don't have anything to add to that. They're it doesn't sound like there's plantings being added, but I agree. It does. It looks sparse. Yeah. I'm hesitant to go too far into it because I think Melissa is sort of our resident. She's our resident expert. So maybe we can pick that up next. Oh, that's right.
Need a mic. Okay. So basically, seriously, there is a person at the actual DEM responsible, and it's in the original contract that they did. So this farming out to these other people who are not doing it, I don't know where that enforcement and follow-through is happening, but it seems like the buck stops with the original contract, which is our DEM people, and they had originally, and I feel like I should go back to that, because this, whatever is going on with that is not happening.
Well, maybe you could connect with Melissa, because I think you're both doing independent research on a similar topic, so maybe
Yeah, it
just,
is similar, and she's been saying, she's talking to someone who's gonna do something, going to do something, when? That's when I'm wondering.
okay.
Like,
Well,
yeah, we started talking about it in the midwinter, so it was like, okay. But now, April came, isn't this the time when that should be growing?
I agree. It'd be a prime time to plant things in those beds, but, yeah, without more information, I think we should.
Yeah, so,
probably take a look.
yeah, all right. So that really, it's kind of not our thing because it is like Department of Transportation.
Yeah, I don't think
So
it's,
I feel like but it's our town and people are looking at us because we're the Conservation Commission. Why is this looking like that? Yeah.
yeah, I'm not sure that anyone's coming down on the Concom, but,
Well, I stood with hundreds of people were asking about, like, what is going on with these things? Just happened to come up, I was at the rally on Saturday, and
Oh,
like,
yeah,
why are they all empty? Because that's where we stood, Old Tower Road, we did it from, Chipotle all the way up to the Dunkin' Donuts. And so hundreds of people stood there in front of those wondering about that.
well, good. Maybe that demonstration
What's our opportunity?
garnered some attention for our
Okay, yeah.
We'll circle back and
Yeah,
discuss
yeah,
it when
do that.
we have Melissa here as well. Is there anything that anyone wanted to add on that topic? No. So I'll check in with Melissa via email before our June meeting, and I'll just see if she has more that she wants to add, or if that's worth adding to that month's agenda. But I don't think that we have any public comment. There was no TRC meeting in April. Has there been one? No, it's next week for May. Do we have someone on the docket as a designated Concom rep for May? Do we know who? You thought it was me? I've gotten away with several back to back to back. Well, I don't know how many times I need to offer that in a row before I get off the hook. Okay, Wednesday, May 14th. That's next week. I can do that. There is one scheduled for that. I can attend that TRC meeting. No worries. Thank you for holding me to that. Our next meeting is scheduled for June, I don't even know when, June 3rd. Okay, and again, there's no public comment, so I will adjourn tonight's meeting. The time is 7:56. We did almost have a 2-hour meeting. Yeah. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Do I have to motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion that we adjourn.
Okay, motion by Carol, seconded by Vern. Meeting adjourned at 7:56.